Well, it's been a while since I did a MMA video, and I found something I wanted to talk about. I've still been watching MMA, of course, pretty religiously. Watching the UFC cards, Bellator cards, other promotions, KSW, not Dream. One, that's the one. I miss Dream. But anyways, so I figured I would give some comments on just some couple things. But you can see in the title, this is the Mike Perry special.
Commander, you've received a new message at your private terminal.
And my phone has decided to go off. But it's just YouTube telling me shit. So let me just quickly mute the phone. Off, please. Thank you. Okay. So, obviously last night the UFC had its Apex event. The Apex Center is, of course, their own little really sure what I would call it per se. Their own event center, I guess, is what it comes down to. And in the co-main event, Mike Perry defeated Mickey Gall by unanimous decision. And of course, this was notably weird in the sense that his corner consisted entirely of his girlfriend and no one else. A lot of people are kind of like, I think tongue-in-cheek, cheering this move on as, oh, what a badass. And don't get me wrong, for Mike Perry, this is probably fine. He claims that he doesn't listen to his corners anyways, and to be honest, he fights like someone who does not, in fact, listen to his corner at all. So there is probably more than a morsel of truth to that statement. And he will probably win the fights that he was going to win anyways, and lose the fights he's going to lose anyways, because, I mean, Mike Perry is an exceptionally weird fighter in the sense that physically, I don't really know if you've ever seen a fighter who more embodies the qualities of an MMA fighter, the immense toughness, the power, the strength, the explosiveness, the speed. Like, physically, Mike Perry has always been an exceptionally impressive fighter. What holds him back is any kind of technical development. And he's had some good coaches over the years, and they've not really progressed him in any way. So, I mean, if you're not going to listen, you might as well just save the money on the corner and go for it. Although, based on his lack of understanding of any taxes, that could be interesting because just to touch on this, of course, my professional background is accounting, and I do taxes, American and Canadian taxes, quite frequently. It feels like what Mike Perry has is the classic subcontractor or contractor problem, which is not realizing that you're getting all of your money up front without deductions for EI or pension or anything like that. And then when the government comes knocking at tax time, you will have a massive tax bill because you have paid zero. So if you spend all of that money, yeah, you end up with a massive bill because he probably has made, I don't know, let's see here. He fought, just got his record up here. He fought in 2019 4 times. Oh, one of those was a grappling bout. So 3 times, went 1 and 2. Let's see if I can get what his payout for this card is. His disclosed earnings for his career, according to Tapology, is $564,000. Mike Perry's fighter pay. Let's see. Mike Perry had a guaranteed purse of $90K. Took home $90K winning bonus. So, I mean, last night alone he made $200,000, and he had 3 fights in 2019. So he lost 1, so let's say, or he lost 2 and he won 1. So let's say it was probably not terribly far away from $400K. So yeah, there's a massive tax bill on that. But anyways, you're not here for that. please don't actually glorify this as a brave move or a smart move to any young and up-and-coming fighter, because the fact that it's not a bad idea for Mike Perry to do this is a sign of the flaw on Mike Perry. And the flaw on Mike Perry has always been a lack of technical development, a lack of fight IQ, and a lack of ability to adjust anything. He's going to go out there, and the simple thing is, he's good to fight for 15 hard minutes. He's good to not lose his confidence. He's good to probably out-slug you and probably out-physical you. And the people who have been able to beat him on that are people with exceedingly deep skill sets, like a Vicente Luque, like a Donald Cerrone. Maybe not so much a Jeff Neal, but could just be that Jeff Neal is that solid of an athlete. I still don't 100% know what I make of Jeff Neal, but wins over Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, and Mike Perry now are making it pretty hard to ignore that he is something significant. Undefeated UFC fighter at 5-0. Even if the loss to Kevin Holland does suggest some shortcomings. And of course an early loss to Martin Santo, but we'll see. And then his biggest win, probably, it's Paul Felder, but Paul Felder was coming up a weight class. His biggest win is probably Alex Oliveira, who is a fighter who's the exact same as him, basically. A really physically imposing dude. A guy built for fighting, who doesn't necessarily adjust or show a depth of skill or a changing game. And that's the thing. Like, this fight really was showing that Mickey Gall, for whatever he does actually have, is just not that good of a fighter. And it's been shown the people that Mickey Gall beats are very deficient technically and physically. And that's the thing, is even if Mike Perry is defective on a technical level, he is incredibly physically impressive. Because to this date, Mickey Gall's biggest win still is Sage Northcutt, and that's not a rousing endorsement. Since beating Sage Northcutt and moving to 4-0, lost to Randy Brown, who's the closest Mike Perry in allegory because he's a physical freak. Beat George Sullivan, who just isn't very good. And then lost to Diego Sanchez, and then beat Salim Touari, whose UFC run, you can't really lose to Warley Alves, Keita Nakamura, and Mickey Gall and really be considered anything other than like a good testing ground. He's a guy who also doesn't have any notable wins to his name. So there's definitely that. And at the end of the day, realistically, Mike Perry is being a dumbass. But as long as it only affects him, it doesn't really matter. And he'll probably still win some fights because he is that physically impressive. The other notable fights on this card, of course, Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier went to absolute war. Although the typical weakness that has been apparent in Dan Hooker's game came back to bite him again. He just slowed down. He doesn't have the cardio to keep up the pace that he put out here, or even in the Paul Felder fight early on, over the course of 5 rounds. And if you can survive what he's doing, and Dustin Poirier, seemingly tough guy, very game, mentally and durable, was able to walk through that fire and get the job done. And then the only other real notable result, really, there were some other good fights. I'll give a quick shout out to Brendan Allen and Kyle Daukaus, who had a really solid fight. Big wins for Takeshi Sato, Julian Erosa, Tanner Bozer. Karma Worthy continues to be like a feel-good guy for the year. I think that there's a big future in Kay Hansen. She needs to develop some, but she's also 20 years old, so plenty of time to do that. And but the other thing worth talking about, of course, was Maurice Greene's modified choke from bottom, is what Tapology is calling it. I'm going to call it a headlock, frankly. Well, okay, that's not fair. There was choke elements to it. It was effectively an arm triangle from bottom, which is not something you should really ever get caught in. And honestly, I think Villante just kind of panicked and tapped out. It's a very Gian Villante way to lose. He's always been a guy who's very capable of fighting down to your level and losing despite having every theoretical physical advantage that you could ask for. He's an amazing athletic specimen, although came in looking real fat for this fight. So that move to heavyweight may have just been an excuse to eat more pizza. I don't know. But it was a disappointing debut, that is for sure. The only other thing to really talk about in the MMA sphere right now is the Max Rohskopf thing. He quit on the stool in his UFC debut after Robert Drysdale, his coach, basically refused to throw the towel in or tell the referee that this was over. And on one hand, I'm going to defend Drysdale. On the other, I'm going to sort of indict him, and sort of the same with Rohskopf almost. In the case of Drysdale, a lot of people are really, really angry he didn't call the fight. I don't have a huge problem with it because he, at the end of the day, he did not, in fact, force Max Rohskopf to go out there again. But needless to say, he has put a negative impression of Rohskopf in his debut by not protecting his fighter's reputation to a degree. I don't disagree that on the first, like when your fighter first says call it, that you shouldn't try to give a bit of a pep talk, because part of being a coach is getting someone to go above and beyond their physical limitations or what they think their physical limitations are to move on. But watching that corner scene after he kind of refused twice, it was in fact over, and you were sending him back out there if Rohskopf had felt honor bound to do so, would have just resulted in more destruction. It seems like Rohskopf is not holding against the coach. Drysdale's kind of a weird one to me just because his history of PEDs and some other just people talking about interactions with him have led me to believe that he's a bit of a dickhead. I wouldn't really want him as a coach, particularly in a corner, but that's not formed off of this particular incident. So I think he handled it poorly, but at the end of the day, to a degree, he was also doing what a corner is supposed to do, push you beyond where you were. And in Rohskopf's case, a lot of people are calling him like done or whatever, and it's, to be clear, not a good sign when a fighter has the lack of self-diligence. Excuse me, I'm going to take a quick drink here. Oh, just have an itchy throat today. But I would have to say that it definitely impacts negatively, because a big part of being a professional fighter is the ability to frankly live in a different reality to most people. To be the Anthony Smith, so to speak, whose teeth are coming out and still wants to keep fighting, and in fact would be angry with you for stopping the fight, whether you're the referee or the corner, and really wanting to go out on a shield. Like, there is an element of that to every successful MMA fighter, because you're at the end of the day doing something slightly insane, if we're being completely honest. And apparently Rohskopf lacks that. at least on this day. Maybe this was the first time he had to question himself. I don't know. Does that mean his career is over, and does that mean that he's soft? It doesn't mean that he's soft, and it doesn't mean that his career is over. It just does make me reevaluate how big of a prospect he is. I honestly think he ended up saying yes to the UFC way too soon. And the problem, of course, is if you say no to the UFC, often that no becomes a, well, okay, we don't ask again. And there are definitely some downfalls to that option. And in this case, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the UFC does with Max Rohskopf, who they book him up against. Is there even anyone to book him up against that this is not necessarily going to be a problem? Because it's not like he was a short notice replacement in a fight against somebody really established within the division and really, 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 really strong. Because he was fighting Austin Hubbard. Austin Thud Hubbard, who at 12-4 is a good veteran, has a lot of good things, but is a guy who, well, you know what, actually, I guess losing decisions to Marco Madsen and Davi Ramos, or Davi Ramos, I should say, not really a problem, and he beat Kyle Preplek, who is a fighter I'm pretty familiar with. That being said, not really a UFC caliber guy. Now, what is concerning is that on the not super long ago, 2017, Hubbard did lose to Eric Wisely, who is a guy who is pretty solidly not UFC caliber. So there's a lot of downsides here. I'm very intrigued to see what Rohskopf does in his next fight, or what the UFC does, because he's probably still on contract. If we're being honest, like, it probably has a 3 to 4 fight deal, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Basically, I have questions, but I don't have facts that say that Max Rohskopf is not capable of being a top-notch UFC fighter. Like I said, I do wonder if he was a guy that legitimately, looking at his background and his athletic abilities, I kind of thought was like way too raw, but a guy who definitely could be like future title material. And that mentality does make me really question if that's the case. But his physical gifts, a solid coaching environment, even if I'm not a big fan of like Robert Drysdale as a person, should lead to him being a mainstay. It just depends if he just is a type of guy who will fold if things get tough. And if that becomes a pattern, I mean, it's a big problem. This was a late notice replacement fight. Who knows how healthy he was taking it. And obviously a fight that I think, just from a UFC standpoint, he was not ready for. So those are my thoughts on Rohskopf, my thoughts on Mike Perry, my thoughts on the fight card from last night. Might do some more MMA stuff, obviously, with the COVID. Right now I'm not working, and that does mean I do have a lot of time on my hands. So we'll see. I might get into doing more thoughts on MMA, because taking the time to watch the fights, it's just not really wanting to cover some of the really greasy aspects of this business right now, the fighter pay and the politics of it all, and the self-serving political stance that the UFC often has. And of course, the fact that Dana White is a complete sociopath who is, more than any other representative of sport, someone that you can't remotely trust what they say. In fact, the joke is, of course, Dana White says something is happening. It's not going to happen. And if Dana White says something isn't happening, it will actually, in fact, happen. So there is that. Anyways, ask your comments down below. Subscribe. Well, actually, hey, you know what? I don't even know if I want to push the subscribe stuff. I mean, I'm not even promising to do videos after this. So I don't know if you've been with me this whole time. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the video.